Welcome, everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes to get started as a courtesy to those who are still in the middle of connecting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. We have a great topic to cover today, but first, a few reminders. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the IM window. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. We've had a large number of people register for this webinar, and we're thrilled to see such interest, but it means it may be impossible for us to respond to every single question in real time. If we don't get to your question, or if you're listening to this as a recording after the fact, please ask your question on our community. I'll give you that link in a moment, and we will address it there. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/AIP recordings. And I'm going to be giving and pasting out a bunch of links here, but I realize some people can't copy and paste from the IM window, so I will put all the links we're giving out on the course of this call on that aka.ms/AIP recording. So if you'll write down that one link, that'll get you to everything else we're giving out here. While you are there, please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security-community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly with our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, requesting features, giving feedback, reviewing our product roadmaps, attending in-person events, or joining webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. We have a fascinating topic for you today. We'll be talking about unified labeling in Azure Information Protection. I'd like to introduce our presenter and AIP expert. Adam Bell is a senior program manager on our AIP team and part of what we call our Get to Production group. He helps our customers deploy and configure AIP, so he has deep expertise in this topic. With that, I'll hand it over to him. Adam?
Thanks very much, Ryan. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending where you're tuning in from. Just get my slides. There we go. So we've had a lot of development planned this year, and much of what we're looking to deliver is across multiple teams within Microsoft. The reality of this is the information protection landscape is rapidly changing over the course of this year and into next. We can appreciate that all this change is generating a bit of confusion with our customers and our partners. And today, we talk about 3 different types of clients. We have several portals where sensitivity labels can be managed, and the features available across both the backend and the clients varies. The first thing I'd like to make clear is that this challenge is planned to be a short-term situation. While we're transitioning to what we call unified labeling and enabling features across the Microsoft platform under what we refer to as Microsoft Information Protection. Today's session is to help clarify some of the common pain points my team hears about and to provide some details on how things are today. The topics we talk about today are likely to change, and by that I mean things are going to get better. And I'll call out as we're going through the presentation where new features are coming, and I've included links in the deck to our documentation to help stay current on what features and when they'll be released, as well as additional details to help explain things further. And as Ryan mentioned, this session will be recorded, and also the deck will be available afterwards. So the links in the deck will provide to you at the end as well. So the agenda. First of all, I'd like to level set and ensure we're all on the same page regarding AIP and MIP. Then we'll have a look at what we mean by unified labeling. We'll have a look at the 3 different client options, and we'll drill into the specific features available today and what our plan is in the longer term for these clients. We'll walk through the mechanics of activating unified labeling, what happens on the back end, and what's involved in transitioning from the Azure portal for label management to the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. And we'll finish up, we'll touch on onboarding controls, the super user feature, and AIP logging. This might be a fairly brief session. Unfortunately, there's not much in the way of demos, and there's a lot of slideware, but we're just trying to get the message across. So before we get started, let's hopefully remove any confusion about what we mean by MIP. Most of my customers have heard about AIP already, and now there's this new phrase which has been bouncing around for quite a while with Microsoft Information Protection, or MIP. MIP is a framework to provide a consistent set of information protection capabilities across our multiple products. This is across multiple products and the platform at Microsoft, and also extending this across to our partner products that choose to support this capability. And as you can see, it's not a SKU or a product. So, unified labeling. One of the common questions we get is, what's the difference between unified and built-in labeling? Unified labeling is the platform that provides support for labels across our products and our platforms through using the MIP SDK. Whereas built-in labeling is where we enable the classification, labeling, and protection, what we refer to as CLP, features built into the product. So there's nothing required to be added on. Examples of this are Office for Mac today, Office for Android and iOS, and soon we'll have Office for Windows previewing shortly. And we talk about it being built into Office, we're referring specifically to the Pro Plus or subscription version of Office. If your organization is using an older version of Office, such as Office 2016, Office 2013, or Office 2010, or you plan to use Office 2019 when it's released, you'll need to look at the AIP add-in to provide your classification, labeling, and protection features. Another popular question that comes up when we're talking about unified labeling and the features being built into Office natively is, well, what about Office 365 information protection? So with this, we do provide some basic features out of the box. It's available in Office Pro Plus, as I just talked about a moment ago, so the subscription version. You have to use the built-in capabilities within those Office products. You can label and apply protection for Office documents only, so no PDF or what we call generic protection or P file. And it's limited configuration and reporting that we make available in the Security and Compliance Center. So this is everything that's not available via the AIP add-in or which requires an AIP subscription. So when we talk about labeling clients or AIP clients, today we have three types of clients that support Microsoft information protection. We have the Azure Information Protection client. This client talks to the Azure portal for label configuration, policies, and conditions. This is the one most of our customers are familiar with. We also have the Azure Information Protection Unified Labeling client. Now, this client talks to the Security and Compliance Center for label configuration, policies, and conditions. And lastly, we have built into the Office product directly. Here, there's no add-on. The features are available right out of the box. And of course, as I mentioned before, this only applies to the subscription version of Office. So we have three different client types. And one of the common questions that comes up is, which is the correct client for me to use today? And there's a lot of emphasis in this session around today. This scenario will change quite rapidly over the coming months. So what we're trying to do at the moment is just give you a snapshot into how things sit as they are today. So I'll talk about the table in a moment. The summary of the different clients available today is that as of right now, the AIP client with the latest general available client version of 1.48. This is the client that supports all the features developed for AIP so far, and it's the client that's been around for the last couple of years. Then we have the AIP Unified Labeling client, which has the latest general availability version of 2.0779. This supports most of the features of the AIP client, but we have more of these planned over the coming months. This client was written from the ground up based on the MIP SDK and has been around since April. And then the features built into the Office products are currently available for Mac, Android, and iOS. We have a preview planned for Windows in the next few months. And the initial release for the built-in features is focused on manual classification functionality only. So all the automation and all the other features, they're coming for that. And we'll go through this in more detail shortly. The long-term plan is to bring all these capabilities that are important to our customers to the unified labeling clients. And as the unified labeling clients, whether it be the add-in or the built-in versions, implement the features that individual customers need, as they're important to you, we encourage you to migrate to the unified labeling client. The long-term goal is to have feature parity across both the unified labeling clients so that organizations will eventually apply sensitivity labels using the features built into Office. Or if you have parts of your organization that won't be on the subscription version of Office, including Office 2019 when it's available, these clients will need to have an AIP unified client deployed. The AIP client as it stands today will continue to receive security updates and it will be maintained, but all the engineering effort going forward for new features are focused on the unified labeling clients. So on the screen, we have the three columns. We have AIP client, AIP unified client, and then we have the features built into Office. And at a high level, we have the features that will kind of push you one way or the other today. So if Scanner is something you need to deploy right now, then you're using the AIP client. Same with hold your own key, and also user-defined permissions and advanced settings. And then moving across to the middle column, you need to activate your labels to unified labeling, which is something we'll talk about more later on. If Scanner and hold your own key and UDP isn't as critical for you, or you're not using them today, this is a valid option for you. And then we have the features that will be available built into Office. So this situation will change, as you can see by the note on the bottom. We have a number of changes coming shortly, actually. So Scanner, user-defined permissions, and also some of the advanced permissions, advanced settings will be released shortly as well. So as I mentioned, this is a moving landscape. I will skim over this slide a little bit because we will drill into this a lot more, the points as we move through the session. But to give you a quick summary of the situation today, so I emphasize that a lot and I will apologize, but it's going to change. Here are some of the things that are not available in the unified client as we sit today. And as we go through this session, actually, I do have a link further on that points to our documentation that explicitly calls out some of the things we don't plan to support in the unified client. So there is a bit of a difference there. There's things we don't support today, and there's things that we're not planning to carry forward, but we'll get to that. So we've talked about the different clients. You may or may not have seen them yet. So to give you a bit of an idea, in this screen, we can see the difference between the two AIP add-ins. On the left, we have the AIP client, and here you can see the AIP toolbar, which most of our customers are familiar with. On the right-hand side, we have the AIP Unified Labeling Client. The toolbar is not shown here by default, but it can be enabled, and you can see actually in the drop-down menu, there's an option there to show the bar. The other, I guess, major difference between them, other than some subtle UI changes, is that with the AIP unified client, we refresh the policy a lot more frequently. It's every 4 hours or the next application restart. But they're very similar. The UI change with the stamp for sensitivity and rather than protect is where we're moving to, and this is something you'll see a lot more consistent across when we go built into Office as well. Talking of built into Office, on this screen we can see the sensitivity labeling built into the Office app. There is no option for the toolbar to be displayed, and I'll talk more about this later. The labels are accessible through the sensitivity button on the home ribbon. You can also see the label visible in the system bar at the bottom of the application. In this instance, it's marked general, and you can see the stamp. If the label had protection applied, that stamp would appear as a lock. One of the common questions that comes up when we talk about the features being built into Office versus the AIP add-in is what will happen in a scenario where we have both. And I just want to spend a moment talking about that because this behavior has changed since our Yammer announcement a few weeks ago. And it's come about largely due to customer reaction to the direction we were planning to take, which is you had to deploy a registry setting that would stop Office from disabling the add-in. The feedback we received was loud and clear. This is an undesirable behavior. So we've reversed that. So while we're working towards getting feature parity between the AIP unified client and the features built into Office, the plan is that Office will defer to the add-in. So at the point in time when we make the features available built into the product, if you have the add-in installed, Office will leave it alone. Now, as we move down that path and we get to a point where Office has feature parity with the add-in, at that point, Office will disable the add-in unless you set a registry setting to prevent that. It's not happening imminently. It's going to take some time for the built-in features to get parity with the add-ins, but just to call out earlier that behavior change so that you don't have to take an action right now. There's plenty of time to plan for that as we progress. So the next 3 slides are table heavy, so I will apologize for that, but I think it's important that we spend a little bit of time just looking at trying to clear up some of the confusion between the 3 different clients and what features are available today. This is one of the top pain points that in our team we hear a lot. So we have this table, we've got the feature down the left-hand side. The first column is the AIP client. That's going to have yes against everything because that's the complete feature set we've deployed so far. The next 2 columns, we have the AIP unified labeling client, and then we have the features built into Office. So, and as we walk through that, you can see that labeling actions, we have manual, recommend, and automatic. They're available today in the AIP unified labeling client. But as I mentioned before, built into Office will be the manual classification only. That's our first milestone. Once we've managed to deliver that, obviously we'll work on additional functionality. We have centralized reporting available today in both the AIP client and the AIP unified labeling client, not available in built into Office today. You're going to read this a lot faster than I can read through these, so I might just call out things to be aware of on this page. And bearing in mind, we have the recording afterwards, and you'll have access to the deck to review this at your leisure afterwards. Some of the major changes are the File Explorer right-click actions. With the integrations with Adobe, we're moving towards adopting this sort of new version, new behavior of PDF. So we're moving away from protected PDF format. So when we talk about unified labeling, we're talking about the native versions or the built-in versions of PDF support there. Okay, moving on to the next page. So the PowerShell commands are not relevant to the built-in version of Office because these are things we deploy when we install the client. There is some changes coming with the PowerShell commandlets. And one of the notes on this page, you'll see, it might be on the next page, and there's the next one down actually, that you must be connected to the internet to use the classify and protect options and also the PowerShell commands. As mentioned before, hold your own key is not currently supported in unified labeling. That's something that's currently being evaluated. And the event logs, in AIP today, we store the events in the event logs and we send them to central reporting. For unified labeling, we don't put them into the Windows event logs. Let's pause there and moving on. And on the last table slide, We have some customizations, which are all available today in the AIP client. They're not available in the AIP Unified Labeling client today, but a number of these are being reviewed and will be available in the coming months. And the same situation with being built into Office. These are being evaluated. Scanner for on-premise. So yes, we have that with the AIP client today. For the AIP Unified Labeling client, it's not currently available, but it will be released within the next few months. This is something that's imminently close to being available, and it's not relevant to Office. Track and revoke is something that we're looking at to see about a redesign for this feature. So this isn't included currently while we evaluate that. And that's probably the main points on that page. As I say, you'll have this table to refer to afterwards. So here we can see what it looks like for the end user with the AIP for Unified Labeling client installed. This is the Windows only client, so we have the option to show and hide the AIP toolbar, and labels are also available from the home ribbon as well. So we've got a couple of choices around how we want to manage that. Toolbar aside, the look and feel between this and the built-in Office experience is very similar, specs near identical. This will also help ensure that if you deploy the AIP Unified Labeling client today and later move to the built-in features in Office, there's no major visual changes for your end users unless you show the AIP toolbar on Windows. So this should help the transition as we're moving forward without impacting your end users too significantly. While we're talking about the AL toolbar, let's drill into that for a moment. This has been around for as long as we've called the product Azure Information Protection. It's nice and it's visible and it appears front and center in the user's workflow. With a long-term goal of moving to having the features built into the Office products, we get a few advantages with that. Being built into the product means we can enhance the features that get delivered, and it allows us to provide a more integrated experience. And we have a number of these planned as we move forward beyond the manual classification piece, and that will become evident once we start looking at some of the automation that's being planned currently. We also get a performance increase as we're no longer a .NET add-in to Office, and we can also avoid situations where the add-in is prevented from loading. There will also be no need to deploy and also manage updates for AIP as a separate component to all of your endpoints. And while that's not a major headache, it's still a task that you need to do today. So if we can remove that, fantastic. And then lastly, we get to expand beyond that Windows-centric position we've been up until recently. And this last point is where the toolbar comes in. By being able to leverage that cross-platform support, it's where the toolbar becomes a bit of a challenge. We need to consider that Office works across Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS, and across these different form factors as well. So we've got things like phones and tablets, not just laptops and desktops. A toolbar takes up too much screen real estate to make this feasible across all form factors. So this feature is not currently planned as being part of built-in for Office. So talking of cross-platform, let's look at where support for the built-in Office for CLP is, or classification, labeling, and protection. I do have the URLs for this page and another public-facing page as well on the next slide, so don't worry too much if you see features here that you're not familiar with. We've already released support for sensitivity labels for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint on Android and iOS. However, we're still waiting for Outlook on mobile there. Other popular requests we have and are working on is web apps, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook Web Access, and also obviously built in into the Office for Windows. So after this session, if you're looking at this, a month's time or 2 months' time, and you're kind of going, yeah, but we know things are moving, things are changing. What is the state of this? We have the ability by going to these links to see what the current status on those is, whether we've released them, and also to pick up other features that are hitting those pipelines. This is a good location to check what's planned and when. So we've talked about the clients so far. Let's walk through the mechanics of what happens when you actually activate unified labeling in your tenant. So just before we do that, this is the goals that were aimed by the development team as when we activated, so when we developed this feature. Obviously, we want to enable users to continue running their existing AIP clients, but we want that interoperability between those clients and the MIP labeling clients, leveraging the unified labeling client all built into Office. The key takeaway here, and you can read this faster than I can read it out to you, is that no content needs to be relabeled. Right? We're using the same underlying mechanisms here, and regardless of the client, these labels and this protection is mutually recognizable. We wanted to enable admins that use the Azure portal to be able to manage their labels, to be able to continue to create, update, and delete those, whether it be in the Azure portal or the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center during the transition period while you have both AIP clients and unified labeling clients. And then the next part is we're still working to make this a better experience. Today, we can't share those policies and conditions because they're formatted differently. We are working on a feature that will allow you to push a copy of them from the the Azure portal to the Security and Compliance Center, so you don't have to recreate everything on that side of things. Also worth noting that we're planning for all new tenants that they will automatically be onboarded for unified labels. So we'll get to a point shortly where if you're new to AIP, this will already be done for you and you won't have to go through this process. So if you're not familiar with this, I'll just spend a couple of slides stepping through what it looks like to the admins, and then we'll have a look at what's going on the back end. So to start with, you need to log on to the Azure portal and open up the AIP blade. From there, you can see in the left-hand side, we have unified labeling. If you click on that, you then need to click on the activate button. And just to make sure it wasn't accidental, we'll prompt you before proceeding. And at that point, we'll start to take some actions, and I'll drill on the details in just a moment. So the process has started. And then once it's complete, you can see a summary of all the actions that took place. So this is the admin view. And I will touch on some of the roles and permissions at the end of this as well. But let's have a look now at what actually occurs on the back end. You don't need to worry about this too much, but it's useful and it might help understand things a little bit better. So it's worth spending a few minutes on this. So in purple on the left-hand side, we have AIP as it stands today for the majority of our customer base. In blue on the right-hand side, we have our MIP users. And prior to activation, you basically have two separate sets of infrastructure. Nothing too complicated there. When you activate, we actually move the labels from our proprietary store in the AIP service to the Security and Compliance Center unified store. A note, I said move here, not copy. From that point onwards, the AIP service will get the labels from the same store as SCC, but it will continue to get the policies and conditions from the AIP store. Now I'll pause for a moment, let that sink in. It doesn't change that an AIP client still talks to the AIP service in Azure. But what happens behind the scenes is we'll proxy that request and we'll retrieve the information from the SCC store. Policies remain in the original store, but the labels are shared. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we can't share the policies and conditions because they're in different formats. So we activate, our labels are moved across to the SCC store. And then you can see we set up this connection between the two services so that moving forward, AIP will get the labels from SCC. At this point, you're in a kind of a mixed mode, I guess, and you can have AIP clients and you can also use, the unified labeling clients. And as I mentioned earlier, as you find features are being delivered to the unified labeling clients, at some point it will make sense for you to consider moving over to that client from the AIP client today. Now, as we move through that process and you find that once that's complete, you won't need to have everything in the AIP side of things again, and you won't need to configure things in the Azure portal. One thing worth touching on though is while you still have AIP clients deployed, whenever you make a label change in SCC, you'll need to hit that publish button in the Azure portal so that these clients get downloaded and updated policy file. But once we've migrated everybody over and you're on unified labeling clients in your environments, we can start to remove our dependency on that infrastructure. And so we'll get to a point where SCC becomes your single portal to manage all your labels and policies. And the end result there is the roadmap aim is to get all your clients and labels and policies from the Security and Compliance Center. So this is what we're trying to get to. There is some short-term pain for some of our customers while we're in this two split scenarios. but we are working to do that as short as time frame as possible to give you the options to move forward. So touching on roles, for the AIP clients, when you're doing the configuration within the Azure portal, we have 3 roles that are available. We've got the information protection administrator, we have a security admin, or a global admin. And then once we're in the security and compliance center, we've got the security admin, the compliance admin, or global admin. And this is all detailed a lot more in the link provided. So a note about the AIP admin role. Once you've activated and you've moved to unified labels, you cannot continue to use this role unless you grant it the rights in the Security and Compliance Center. And having just gone through that workflow, you can see why, because the labels are now in SEC, so we need to give that role access to that. Alternatively to using the roles defined on this screen, you can create a new role group for these users, and you can add either the sensitive label administrator or the organization configuration roles to that group, and you'll have the same capabilities. So here we can see the labels displayed, in this instance, in the M365 compliance portal, once unified labels have been activated. Now, the sharp-eyed among you may have noticed that there are a number of portals where labels can be managed. Most of this depends on what licensing bundle your organization bought. Whether you went for the security or the compliance bundle or something else, we have the M365 Security Center, which is at security.microsoft.com. We have the M365 Compliance Center at compliance.microsoft.com. And then for everybody else, we kind of have the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center, which you can access through portal.office.com by going to the admin side of things. I tend to talk mostly around the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center, as the majority of customers appear to be using that one, but it's the same functionality surfaced up in each of those portals. It's just the licensing which dictates which one you're more likely to get pushed towards. Also, while we're on this screen, we sometimes get asked around retention labels, and as you can see on this slide, they're also available in the SEC portal on the tab next one over for sensitivity. Now, we did review whether it would make more sense to have retention be a property of a sensitivity label. We are still looking into this, but feedback from the majority of our customers so far is that retention is a different thing. When we look at retention, you configure it today, it applies to the files that are residing within Office 365, and that's where we have the ability to apply those actions, whereas sensitivity labels stay with the file no matter where it travels. So just a quick note on this slide, we've gone through some of this previously. We've released the first general availability client for the unified labeling client back in April. This has manual automatic labeling initially. We do have consequent releases planned over the next 2 quarters, which are looking at advanced settings, user-defined permissions, and of course we have the scanner as well. But the main thing for this slide, I think that's important, is the features that are not currently planned for the unified labeling client. So there's a link there that's worth having a look at. So the last couple of slides I have, there's not a lot of information on these. It's really just the fact we've had some confusion with our customers. And so I've put these on these slides just to call out to help clarify. So when it comes to the onboarding controls and the super user capabilities, nothing's changed between the different clients. It's the same behavior today as it always has been. So if anyone that's kind of wondering, well, how does that impact with the move to unified labeling and the move to these unified labeling clients? Nothing. It's the same behavior as it's always been. And then around logging, this raises a few questions as well. And we do have working on around this, but today we have the AIP Central Reporting, which is currently in preview. If you've been using a client that was deployed from December onwards that supports this feature, you can send all the events to a central location, and we can surface those in dashboards for you. We also have the Azure RMS service, which captures our admin and usage logging. Nothing is changing specifically around these when it comes to the unified labeling. We are looking at this around the centralized reporting, and we are looking at trying to get those Azure RMS service logs into our central location so that we can surface this in a single place, so you're not trying to go in multiple areas, whereas today you need the PowerShell commandlets to get those logs. So just to review our recent capabilities that we've announced, this isn't limited just to AIP. As you can see here, we've got data loss prevention for Microsoft Teams chats as well. We do have some new updates around trying to help with credential leaks, and we have some GA features that are up there. We've also got a bunch of blog announcements here, which I've kept on the slide because I think they're super useful for you. If we look just a high-level summary of our roadmap, you can see a lot of the features mapped out here. You can see the ones we've GA'd already and where we're planning to release these. This is a snapshot in time. These are our planned dates. The links I showed earlier around the roadmap and the Office public-facing page, they're really good because they should be updated fairly frequently to show you if these dates change and to give you an idea when the features that you care about will be delivered. So that was a fairly short session from our point of view. I know we allotted an hour for this. For us, it was really around just trying to reach out and provide some clarity to the confusion that's currently out there regarding this move to unified labeling. I have colleagues on the call that hopefully have been fervently answering your questions in the IM. I will pause just for a moment to see if Ryan has anything pressing that we want to address, or if anyone else on the team wants to answer any of the more complicated questions. So I will pause now for Ryan.
Great, thank you, Adam. Yeah, and as you mentioned, I know this is a very complex topic that spans multiple different areas. So to our GTP and product group folks on the team, I'm going to throw these questions out to all of you, and if it's in your area or something where you have the knowledge, jump right in and answer. We don't want to leave that all to Adam due to the complexity of this. It's too much for any one person. So let's raise a couple of questions here that are popping in. Not activating AIP and creating labels from scratch. So will not activating AIP and creating unified labels from scratch not work then, using them as two completely independent consoles?
That's a really great question, and I perhaps should have drilled into that a bit more. So what happens is if you create labels, even with the same name in the Security and Compliance Center, they will get a new unique identifier. And so they're effectively new labels. And so if you have users that are working on, say, Windows today, and they're working in Office, whether it's the AIP client, and then they move to doing something on their phone, so they're using, one of these new unified labeling clients, it's different sets of labels, and you're going to encounter challenges there. The main advantage that we have by activating these labels and basically moving them to the Security and Compliance Center is we're retaining the unique identifier, so that whether you're an AIP client or whether you're an AIP unified labeling client, they are a persistent and consistent label across all clients. Whereas if you recreate them from scratch, you're going to have challenges where, especially when you're looking at protection, things may start to go a bit complex.
Great, thank you. We're getting several questions here around will you get the slide deck? Can you get links to this? Because I know there were a bunch of tables that clarify things in this. Yes. If you the most important link to take away from all of this is aka.ms/AIP recordings. We're going to store there the recording for this call and the slide deck, so you can all go back and reference it. And then any links we've referenced here, I'm going to paste there. It'll take me a few moments after the call to get that all updated, but you can expect that there today. So everyone go write down that link if you're unable to copy and paste it from the IM window, and we'll put everything there. So another question here, can you use unified labels in cloud app security?
That's a good question. So cloud app security has a very deep integration with AIP. The development team in Israel sit quite close to the AIP team. Yes, so what will happen today is if you're on AIP and you haven't activated the labels, Microsoft Cloud App Security will look to the AIP store to get your label information. If you activate your labels, MCAS will notice that, and it will then start getting your labels from the new Security and Compliance store. So you don't even have to do anything. Microsoft Cloud App Security or MCAS will take care of that for you and do it seamlessly on the back end.
Okay, great, thank you. AIP is referred to as proprietary labeling in the presentation. Is the unified labeling an open source or industry standard solution, or is it across any other vendors?
That's the joy when you use someone else's slides in your deck. So no, I mean, it is proprietary. Microsoft have defined the structure of how we write the metadata. So it's not open source, it's not an industry standard, it's defined. But proprietary in that particular slide would just mean we're moving it from the AIP store to the security and compliance store.
Okay, great.
I hope that answers the question. I'm happy if someone else wants to jump in and add to that if I've missed something.
No? All right. Okay, we'll move on to another one. So why would someone use the unified labeling client if it has less functionality in some circumstances than the regular AIP one that can do everything?
Yep, and that is a very good question, and that's part of our challenge for our customers today. It's a short-term problem, is the point I want to draw there. The aim is for the feature parity to exist across both unified labeling clients. But it's we're not in a world anymore where Microsoft develops a product for 3 years and then throws everything over the fence. We're in a much more agile space. We're releasing things, kind of 4 weekly period almost, but generally every 12 weeks. So we're trying to release early and release often. So rather than hold the features back until everything's complete, we're trying to get it out there early. For some of our customers, they only need manual classification, and so it's perfectly acceptable for them to take the AIP unified labeling client today. For others, they have more complex requirements or different requirements, and so they're going to have to hold back. The reason you would move forward today, for example, is if you have users that want to leverage labeling, classification, and protection on, say, Android. So if you've got Android users and you want to be able to do this on your phone or your tablet, you would need to activate your labels, or at least use the labels in Security and Compliance Center to be able to have those appear in those Office clients today. It will get better from more functionality being delivered. We've just got to do this in waves, basically, so that we can catch up.
And let me add something to that, Ryan. This is Raphael. So one of the reasons you may consider the unified labeling client on Windows today, it will be to have the unification of the sensitivity button on the ribbon, and so that's going to give you that consistent experience across all the different platforms. So we're moving away from the protect button to sensitivity button, and we have to customers have been asking us to help them educate their users one way, and it's good to have it consistent across different platforms.
Great, thank you for adding that. So we've got some question here around the advantage of AIP was that it's a platform agnostic solution. What's going to be the most future-proof solution? Is that MIP? What should people be betting on for the future?
Absolutely. So the MIP framework is where everybody within Microsoft that makes sense to integrate is where we're working towards. So we have the AIP add-in today. We're moving towards the AIP unified labeling client because even we recognize that not all of our customers are going to be in the subscription version of Office. So the long-term goal is you'll apply your labels, your sensitivity labels in Office. It'll be built in. There'll be nothing to deploy. And that will work across not just the Office products, but it integrates with features for Windows information protection on Windows 10. We're integrating in the broader MIP story. So this is where we're moving. It's a cross-team, cross-product initiative. And so to really get the best value out of that, you want to be leveraging that with your clients as well. And as Raphael pointed out, it's also for consistency.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see, next question here. Let's see, will the UL client add-in be deprecated once Office has built-in feature parity?
That's a good question. I don't know about timelines. I think what we're talking about, well, no, it won't actually, if you think about it. So we know that not every customer is going to be on the subscription version of Office. So we know we're not going to get 100% coverage, as much as that would be a great scenario. There's going to be scenarios where the business, for whatever reason, needs to have some of its users on a perpetual version for compliance or regulatory or whatever the reasons are. And the minute we're talking, it's not the subscription or Pro Plus version of Office, you will need to use an add-in. So the long-term, I guess, idea there is that where you can, it'll be built into Office. That's where we want our users to be. And for the clients that can't be on that subscription version of Office, you're going to be on the AIP Unified Labeling add-in.
Great, thank you.
Or just to include everything that is outside Office, of course.
Very true.
Right.
Okay. Will the new MIP client work with other DLP solutions like Symantec and McAfee?
I can jump in on some of that. We are working with ISVs and third parties to integrate the MIP SDK into those solutions. And so I know Symantec today already has support with some of their DLP tools, and there are more work to be done with a lot of other ISVs. So stay tuned for more announcement from those partners.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Another good question to raise to the group. Is the recent announcement yesterday around sensitivity labels in SharePoint Online using UL or AIP labels?
So when we start talking about the integration of information protection across the broader Microsoft stack, we're talking about that Microsoft information protection. So they will be looking at the unified labeling in the Security and Compliance Center.
Okay, great. For new customer, labels should now be set up in Secure Center instead of in the Information Blade. Is that correct?
So it depends. It depends on what features are important to the customer. So if you're only looking at manual classification and using the features available in the unified labeling clients, then great. If you have features that are only available in the AIP client today, then you'll want to set those up in the Azure portal under the AIP Blade. But what I'm finding with the majority of my customers is there's a great deal of interest around functionality that is currently, well, is only available to a unified labeling client. So, you know, largely we've got customers that have, you know, Office for Mac users or using Android and iOS for mobile. And so when you start looking at that as well, what you'll find is you'll be in both. You'll have clients that are the Azure Information Protection client, and you'll have settings in the Azure portal, and then you'll have your labels activated for unified labeling, and you'll have labels and configuration in the Security and Compliance Center as well, so that you've got that consistent label across all clients.
Okay, great. Does the modify date of the file get updated when the label is applied, when that metadata is changed?
So if we're editing the document already, then yes, because you're working on the document as part of applying the label. If we're referring to scanner, I'm going to let my colleagues jump in. I'm fairly sure it does change the modified date. And I'll let somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
Anyone correct? Want to correct that? Okay, great. We'll move on to another one. Can you please elaborate on the RMS SDK 2.1 support? In this case, they have a legacy product that just protects with Azure RMS.
So I'm going to let Raphael talk about that because I know he's been doing a lot of work around the SDK. I have some thoughts on that, but I'm sure his are probably more current. If you're cool with that, Raph.
Yeah, I'm reading through the questions right now. So yeah, so we have migrated to the MIP SDK, and so all the work that we're doing, it's going to that latest version of the SDK. So I'm trying to understand what is the ask here.
Well, and I could be wrong here, and I'll take your opinion on this as well, but I'm pretty sure that as part of the MIP SDK, we kind of carried forward pretty much the same APIs, didn't we? Or did we change them?
Yeah, I mean, the functionality, I would say, was carried forward. Some of the APIs might have changed, but yeah, there continues to be support for programmatically, integrating with custom applications and to encrypt, decrypt, read labels. All of that functionality continues to exist. It's just that we're not investing any further engineering time into the kind of older SDK, and everything is being migrated over to the MIP SDK.
Which is definitely the way forward. So I would say if you have an app and you're interested in putting investment into it further, then the MIP SDK would be the direction you want to look in.
Okay, great. How do you migrate from the AIP client to the unified labeling client that's already deployed to workstations? So they've deployed, this customer in this case is deployed via Intune.
So I know that the AIP unified labeling client can be deployed or upgraded over the top of the AIP clients. I haven't looked at Intune specifically, but I would say that logic is in the application to cope with that upgrade. The deployment mechanism should matter less, and I will let a colleague correct me if that's incorrect.
Yeah, you should be able to package the unified labeling client into an Intune package and deploy it just like you normally would any other applications.
And I guess the point to add to that too is once you've done that upgrade process, you should be able to keep it current using the usual update channels. So, you know, if you're in Config Manager, it's your software update point. And I'm sure probably Intune ties into that as well, but that's not an area I'm as strong in.
Okay, great. This one's kind of more of a request than a question here, but someone's asking, can we provide a decision tree that can help new clients make the best decision? Is that something we could put together?
That's a good question. I think it's something we're looking at. We're always looking at ways we can simplify and make life easy for our customers. So we'll take that away and see what we can come up with.
I think that also distributing and publishing the feature comparison between them makes life easier, because if a customer knows that he needs to use a specific feature, he will say, yes, I need this client or the other one.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, those I was just going to say those 3 slides of tables, that will be the main, I think, decision tree for users, customers, is that looking through that, and then it will drive you to which client is appropriate for your environment.
Okay, great. I think it's fair to say that, you know, we're getting a lot of questions on this, which we anticipated, because this is a complex topic, you know, with implications for lots of people. So I think it's fair to say we'll do a follow-up post on our community, you know, looking at any questions we want to elaborate further on here and addressing any of those. So please watch that on our community. And actually, if you could go, Adam, to the original community slide, the very first slide in your deck, that's the better link than that one you've got on the last slide there, the aka/ms.community or /security community. That's the best link for people to go to. Yeah, this one on the beginning here. So, and the recordings there as well. I want to mention we're going to be posting any of the links and anything we've mentioned here to aka.ms/AIP recordings, and then that will put the slide deck there too, and this recording as well, and all those links. But yeah, it is the same website as our aka.ms/security community, where you can actually join our group that'll get you further on this, because there's clearly more to dive into here than we can possibly cover in one webinar. So that's the place to talk to all these same folks who are responding and answering these questions to discuss your individual scenario. So when we get built-in labeling, will the EMS license still be required?
So that will tie back to, let me see if I can just move to this slide. Is it this slide? No, this isn't going to jump easily, is it? So if you deploy the AIP client, or you're doing anything in the Azure portal for AIP, effectively you will need some sort of AIP license, whether it be EMS E3, E5, or some other bundle. The kind of one exception is this slide here, which is If you're only using the built-in capabilities of the Office products, so you're on Office Pro Plus, the subscription version, and we've released the built-in version for Windows at that point, but on Mac, Android, and iOS. If you're only labeling and protecting Office documents, and you're only looking at the Security and Compliance Center for configuration and reporting, then you don't need the EMS license. I think in that scenario, depending on what you're doing, you'll require Office 365, E3 or E5, but I will caveat this by saying, please consult with your licensing expert, because that is not something that I would take lightly.
Okay, great. We've got a general community question here. When should we use Tech Community and when should we use the Yammer group? I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit since I run our public community stuff. So Tech Community is what we use for most of our products, but AIP already had a very thriving community on Yammer, and we didn't want to disrupt that in any way. So Yammer is the primary community you should use for AIP. And if you go to that aka.ms security community link, the link to go to the AIP group takes you over to the Yammer group. So we've got it correctly directed there. So Tech Community is kind of our public landing page for everything community, but it'll take you to the right group there. The Tech Community for AIP we use mainly, the blog there and to make some public announcements, but we've got more activity and more engagement on the Yammer group, so that's the better place to go to ask questions. So thanks for asking that so we can clarify there. So another question here, will unified labeling be available in Teams or Visio?
I think we're reviewing that, but there's nothing committed at this stage.
Okay, great. Let's see, we've got several different questions here. Trying to pick the best one. So once you uninstall the AIP client and install the UL client, do you now lose the view of labels?
Sorry, do you mind just repeating that? I missed the end part.
Sorry, if you uninstall the AIP client and install the UL client, do you lose the view of the labels?
So assuming you're referring to the toolbar there, by default in the AIP unified labeling client, the toolbar is off. There are ways to enable that. So yes, the toolbar will stop showing if you don't take any action.
Okay, great. We've got a question here wondering if we've got kind of a security review comparison of MIP showing how it stands up against other DPP products out there, or perhaps they mean DLP products out there.
I'm not aware of anything specifically there. I will throw that to the rest of the team if they're aware of something that might help.
Anyone know? We'll look at that and respond back to that on our community, do some digging on that, on what we can find there. Can both the AIP and AIP unified client be installed on a single device? And if so, which one wins?
No, well, I've not tested all the different behaviors, but generally speaking, it's not something you really want to do. If you have the AIP client deployed today and you install the AIP for unified labeling client, it will upgrade and basically remove the previous client so that only it remains.
Okay, great, thank you. With that, we're about out of time here, so I want to give a couple more announcements. The most important link to take away from all this, if you want to write down one link to get you to all the others, is aka.ms/AIP recordings. That'll get you to the recording of this webinar. It'll get you to the slide deck, and we will paste any other links you need there, including the links to the Yammer group to ask further questions. So just if you're unable to copy and paste from the IM window, write down that one link and you should be good to go to get all of the others. One of the links I will be pasting there is to give feedback on this webinar. We always love to hear back from you and to hear what you liked about this webinar, areas where we could improve, what things you want to hear about in the future, what are kind of the burning topics on your mind. And of course, as we mentioned previously, We would love to have you in our security community. If you are not already, that's the place to hear about these webinars and talk directly with our product teams and answer these type of questions. I want to thank all of the GTP and product team members who joined us today to answer the large volumes of questions on this topic where people need a lot of clarification. And I want to, of course, thank Adam for a very compelling and very informative presentation. Most of all, I want to thank those of you who joined us for being part of our community and for coming and letting us help educate you on these topics and for asking so many great questions and giving us feedback on these products that really does help make you better, and we're happy to do that. So we hope to see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.